Sure.
Okay, here we go. For the negative team, thank you. You did mention the Hubble Space Telescope, and I think you were trying to say it was something that would promote not having humans in space since the telescope is up there by itself. Is that what you were saying?
Okay, if I may answer that, well, fair enough. The issue we kind of raised is that that people can get excited even about things that do not necessarily involve human. Hubble telescope is one perfectly good example. It is an automated system, and we believe that the pictures that it have been showing us is something that has inspired humanity tremendously, and it is something that can operate completely independently of human missions.
Well, I think I was wondering if you considered that when the Hubble was first launched, it didn't work right. It was an aberration in its mirror, and that it required a human mission to go up there and repair it. And so how does that play into it? Because if it wasn't for the humans to fix it, we wouldn't get any of those images you talked about.
Okay, if I may just answer that since that was a follow-up question. I mean, the fact that it was repaired by humans doesn't mean that it necessarily couldn't have been repaired by robots. I mean, we kind of knew what the issue was, and we kind of could construct a robot. I mean, the fact that human mission was the most available technology at the time doesn't mean that it would probably necessarily be the one today. Doesn't necessarily mean that but it has to be the one in the future. We can still develop robotic repair systems that would do the job just fine. And also, with just a little side note, we do not believe that repairing Hubble telescope would constitute, in fact, a significant focus, which is really the issue at hand today.
So we've just had a question from the one person who's been there. I think it's appropriate that the second question come from a person that just realized that he entered his first competitive debate round 57 years ago, which is probably your ages added up or something.
It's older than any event.
So I'm going to ask a question for both sides. I want to just clarify the positions here because it flows directly from my fellow astronaut's question. Is the negative arguing here for a complete ban on all human activity in space, or simply a lag, and if only for a lag, what's the time frame we're dealing with? And is the affirmative arguing for complete substitution? And if not for complete substitution, for some blended moment, how blended, how much in advance will the robots go out into places humans never have been to set the way, like John the Baptist? So you put those two things together to be answered by each of you, and my question is, are you saying anything different from each other?
Affirmative, why don't you take it first?
Certainly. All right, so we do agree that robots can be used in missions to outer space. We're saying they should not be the focus. That shouldn't be the purpose of going to space, should not be to get robots there or to have them explore. The purpose is to have humans go out and explore, which is extending human perception into new realms, places we haven't been before, new perceptions. And robots are simply tools that we are using to help us do that. So to what extent it's blended is to the extent that, well, obviously, I suppose if you consider the computers on a spaceship to be robots, we need those to get there. The microanalytical devices that our opponents were talking about analyzing the individual samples, yes, those can be robots. But deciding what to do, where to go explore, what to do with those findings should all be a human endeavor, because only humans can really do that. So it should ultimately still be that focus. Although robots can be useful, it shouldn't be the point.
Well, since we understand that there are missions such as one mentioned the missions that, for example, the repairing missions that can be done by humans, that we are not against them. But what we realize is that since we want to explore the universe, we want to get more knowledge, more information, and we want to get beyond the borders. And we understand and realize that the missions that are conducted by humans are simply limited on the near Earth space. Therefore, if we want to advance and gain new knowledge and development, we have to focus on those robotic missions in order to gain that knowledge and in order to gain that information to have new innovations and to have new technologies.
Since there's a little bit of a lull here, I'm going to just ask a follow-up to that, and then I'm going to keep quiet for a while. Again, I'll ask a question to both of you, because I'm trying to figure out what you're saying that's different. And I think I have the difference, but I want to make sure I've got it correctly. The affirmative is saying the goal, for a whole host of reasons, including the ineffable kind of inspiration it's given, the goal of this should be to get humans out there. This is the priority. Then you give a whole bunch of arguments. No, I'm a windbag. You could get it. Then you give a whole bunch of arguments that talk about how humans are superior as a means. And you kind of shift, we used to call that in the old days, away from the goal argument. So your argument seems to be teleological. This is the goal. Your argument, on the other hand, seems to say the goal is knowledge, and since robots can go more quickly to more places, even if they bring back less, the span will produce a greater amount of knowledge, and you don't buy their basic goal, which is the kind of inspiration of getting humans out there. So that's my summary of where the two teams are right now, trying to find the difference between you, because you're both going to use blended methods.
Nick, let's start with you this time around.
Okay. So essentially, we kind of see knowledge as the most important thing, and we believe that while robots can also not only can go further, but I mean the kind of samples doesn't necessarily have to be any worse. We're saying that if it's so required, maybe robots will bring back the samples one day, and we believe that since they're operated remotely, there's no reason. Most of them are, at least. There's no reason why that should be any worse off from what humans can provide. So we think that yes, knowledge is one of the most important things that space can really give us. And this is why we're using robots, because it can go further for lower cost and provide probably the equal quality.
I want to.
Yeah.
Oh,
You're fine.
sorry.
Don't worry
Sorry.
about it. It's okay.
You're a woman. I'm pulling for it. No.
I've been trying to keep her quiet for decades.
So we would say that the purpose of exploration, space exploration in particular, is to figure out how, if, and why we should send humans there. And this is twofold. Currently, it's better to send humans in this respect because of the short term and the long term. The short term, we see the positive externalities of human missions. We see inspiration, international cooperation, and also their scientific value. And all our opponents do talk about how knowledge is valuable, and I completely agree about that. But however, like we said, knowledge without application is like a book that's never read. So why human missions are important is because it's able to garner this scientific knowledge and then apply it to the real world.
Ms. Wade, I believe you want in.
Why, yes, I did. And you're actually anticipating a little bit, because I very much appreciate the perspective questions that Dr. Sexton has raised, because it's important for how we evaluate the debate round. And I think the short-term, long-term stuff is important. But one of the things I want to ask you all, there is tension, it strikes me, when you talk about the needs for sanitation, the developing world. I want to start with you, but I think both of you need to talk about this. We have problems on this earth. And so you're saying, well, robots, human missions are more expensive than robotic missions, but we could just if living space is a problem, put people in Alaska, we need to solve problems here. Do you believe negative that space is required for us to solve the problems we have here? One of the things you said struck me as there was some tension in spending anything on space. Do you believe that we need to explore space, whether it is with robots, blended is the obvious because we apply that on Earth by humans, or we repair telescopes in space with humans? But do you believe that we need that knowledge to solve our problems on Earth?
Yeah, if I may. We do agree that to some extent we have to explore the universe and actually gain the knowledge. That is our main priority as negative sign in this debate. But what we don't believe in is the extent that was brought by the affirmatives. We rather than colonize the other planets and actually give the resources and tremendous amounts of money on something that is actually not technologies and it is not available in current days. We would rather focus the mankind on this planet where we know for 100% that these things that we want to do to prevent those tremendous Armageddon scenarios with asteroids, etc., can be assured that we will actually prevent this and we can do something about it. We think that in the universe, anything in these days with those technologies is certain, but with those Alaska and Siberia shelters, we think that it is really the better way and a sure way how to solve those problems.
Okay, let me ask you this, just because I am going someplace with this. The inspiration of the Hubble telescope, where does inspiration play a role? Both of you talk about this. Where does inspiration play a role for the human in space? How does that play out in the way that you're looking at the argument? You're saying, oh yes, they say this is inspiring, humans go to space, whatever. You're saying, oh, we can do that with electronics. We don't have to do that with humans. But what happens when humans, why is it important that humans be inspired?
Well, if I may answer that, well, the only example was brought by the side of affirmative was the Apollo example. Well, we think that the people were mainly inspired in these days by Apollo, that it was completely new thing. That before the Apollo mission, if I'm not mistaken, no man human has gone to the space and stepped on the other planet than the Earth. So we think that is ultimately the very reason why the people were inspired in those days. It was completely new thing. But we think that in today's days we were more technologically oriented. That the civilization we call it here noblessly as a iPhone generation. The people adore the technologies and the robots. So we think that these robotic missions can inspire people much more in much larger and further extent as the negatives we're trying to pursue in this debate.
Just add to that. But we believe obviously that motivation is important for the reasons here on Earth primarily. Is that ultimately we just want human people to care about, say, science and about things that matter to us, so that we can either get more knowledge or work here on Earth. Well, I mean, engineers are tremendously important to solving the issues today, and this is something we want to inspire. We want to inspire people to enter these fields, and this is so that we can solve our problems here on Earth.
Okay, one last thing and then I'm done for a while. It strikes me that the inspiration argument in this debate ultimately means that humans are going to figure out how to go to space. If the argument over here that you all make that we have contests, we have space privatization. So the question is, what perspective are we debating this from? Is this from the perspective of inevitable humans are going to space? Is this from the perspective of the folks who run the space system, who run robotics industries? You're talking about a cost-benefit analysis, and I'm interested in what the perspective is we're supposed to use to decide this. Are we supposed to care about the developing world that doesn't have sanitation, that can go live on a lunar base? I bet that'd be fun. But do you see what I'm saying? So what perspective do we use as a panel of judges to evaluate the issues that you're making broad claims about inspiration, which strike me as leading to humans in space. And so I'm interested sort of in what perspective you'd like us to use.
May I answer that? Mm-hmm. All right. Well, from our perspective, I think that it's best to judge this both on a view of both a practicality viewpoint and then an inspiration viewpoint. So in terms of practicality, as you mentioned, the problem with today is that we've becoming very globalized and therefore using up a lot of the resources and energy available to us. Therefore, it's in our best interest to tap into the nearly limitless preserves in space. Our opponents provide the counterexample of Siberia. However, as we know, first of all, it's very cold. And second of all, the establishments available in space are on a much bigger scale. For example, the asteroid Ceres is around 100 times the living space of Earth, which gives you a bigger idea of the scope that we're talking about. And then second of all, in terms of a perspective of inspiration, it's clear that humans still have the advantage here. And our opponents claim that today we're more technologically inspired, and that the reason why there was such a big audience for Apollo was because it was a new thing. However, if this were the case, it would not explain why the audiences were so much smaller when the Mars rovers traveled to Mars. Although around 500 million tuned in to watch when Neil Armstrong took his famous small step onto the moon, only 48,000 observed when the Mars rovers traveled to Mars. And these same kinds of things are evident in our world today. We stress personability and personal connections with waitresses and even people that you call on a hotline. So it's clear that people are still more motivated by human presence.
You want to jump back in, Mike?
I had another question. Yeah, go. The affirmative. Okay. You mentioned that it's more expensive to put people into space, and it's because you have to keep them alive and get them back home. But you're saying also that the benefit is better. But did you consider the cost of the life lost? Because as much as you try to keep people safe, space travel for humans is never going to be 100% safe. So how do you account or reason for sending people when you know eventually we have lost people and we're going to probably lose more in the future?
That's a really good point. I mean, there is a huge risk, and that's ultimately what exploring is about. When you explore something, you realize that you're undertaking risk. That's kind of the point of exploring something, to go into these realms that are unknown to mankind. And actually, people are completely willing to do this. Actually, last year, NASA received its highest number of applicants, the second highest number of applicants it's ever received, of 6,300 people. So people voluntarily know the risks, and yet they're still applying to become astronauts because of the fact that they recognize the importance of space. They recognize that it's important for our future and our present.
Okay.
I guess it kind of follows along that line of questioning. If humans are known to be not suitable for an inherently dangerous environment, like to send it into a probe, a mission to a black hole or into the sun or something that would be probably impossible for a human to do, the surface of Venus or something like that, is the affirmative's contention that those missions should just therefore not exist and we should not really go in that direction as a space program, or if you do plan to send them, how exactly would that work out? And then the negative, if you know that such environments are possibly dangerous, probably dangerous, would you continue to make that a focus, or is it things that you're talking about, the things that robots and humans might be able to do, like a mission to the surface of Mars? But what about the more extreme cases?
Well, that's actually also, once again, a good point. And human capabilities have been improving, however. We've been able to develop certain adjustments to what we give our humans to prepare them to go into space, to make them more able to survive those harsh conditions. For example, there's a really cool new technology developing called a biocapsule, which is taken and it has 1 million to 10 million cells in it, and a person takes it and it sits within them, and whenever the body comes under attack by something like a virus or radiation, this cell will split and deliver these organisms that will treat the person for what it came under attack before they even really actually know that they were under attack. So if there's radiation, it will be able to combat those effects of it. And it says each capsule could be capable of delivering many metered doses over a period of years. There's no shelf life. Anyway, so these technologies are developing to enable humans to travel further and get more done. You're right in some cases that the environment, we don't want to go to the surface of the sun right now. We don't want to do that. But we can use robots as a tool to help us. But ultimately, if we want to do any exploring there, if we want to see what's there, we'll have to have human independent thought, human ingenuity to figure out how to do it, and then to go there and find what it is we're looking for, which we may not know what it is.
I'm struggling a little bit with the oh, I'm sorry.
Should
Oh, Vivek wants to take a shot at that question? Please do.
Okay, sure. So yes, we believe that there are very dangerous environments, and this is precisely why we should not send humans there. I mean, no, we've been talking about cost, and that obviously includes even cost in lives. I mean, if we're to send humans to, as affirmative proposes, for instance, to asteroids, we would see tremendous issues that we have to solve: the issues of lacking gravity, the issues of them possibly getting killed in this extremely volatile environment that you cannot simply predict. The issues of radiation and other things like that. We believe that robotic missions are perhaps very well suited, and their reach is higher just because of this. They don't have these limitations, and it all comes down to the fact that they're just machines, and they can withstand much more than robots than humans ever possibly can. If that answers your question.
I'm struggling a little bit with the clash between the two sides. The negative would help me if I've got this right. For the negative first. You don't rule out sending human beings into space as part of your vision of a space program. Is that right?
Well, yes, but we would not make them we would prioritize robots. So we believe that that when those two things are in conflict, we should give priority to robotic missions to allocate more resources to them.
And for the affirmative, you don't rule out you will use robots. You just think the majority of the funding and the mission planning in the future should be built around sending humans and returning them as part of those missions. Is that it?
Essentially, yes.
Okay, so to help me vote, this is a question I'd like you each to answer. Start with the affirmative. I've heard what you say are the benefits of our choosing your focus. Mm-hmm. Inspirational objectives. And do I have the second one right, that you think that the long-term goal ought to be to put humans in living conditions, in space, on resources that are out there beyond the Earth's atmosphere? Are those the two goals?
Yes, being able to expand human presence where we live to other bodies in the solar system.
And so just help me. The inspiration, we'll see if that's effective, or as it's been effective in the past, not because people will just watch it on TV, but because what will happen? What will be the benefits of the inspiration that you seek? And then the second part of my question to y'all is, because I want some temporal element in this debate, I want to know, when will I start to see the benefits of that inspiration, and when will I start to see problems here on Earth, poverty, lack of infrastructure, etc., being returned over what period of time?
I'll take the first part of that question. So you asked about the environment, or I'm sorry, about the focus of inspiration. I'd say the primary achievement of this inspiration is that it creates a sort of intellectually motivated environment, which I think our opponents even are seeking as well. So For example, as my partner brought up, they're currently conducting research into the biocapsule, which is used to combat radiation and possibly other diseases. And this is just one example of the kinds of spin-offs for scientific ingenuity that can be inspired by human exploration. And further than that, it's evident that people are actually inspired by the applications for human astronauts that NASA has received. So basically, through inspiration, we're seeking to create a scientifically motivated environment looking towards the future, which is going to be able to combat these problems. And then
I can take the second part of your question about basically when we're going to see these benefits occurring. Well, first we have to find out if we can actually send humans there. And I brought up the example in 1977 where we had basically a Mars rover, and where there's still, in the Viking mission, it's still being debated about whether or not these findings support a non-carbon life form. But Stephen Hawking finds that a human geologist, could determine whether or not this is a life form within several hours. So we need humans to go into space to first figure out if we can even send them there, because they are the ones that are able to make these observations and draw the conclusions. And that's probably the most important advantage of humans over robots, is the ability to think, their ingenuity, and their ability to draw conclusions.
All right, so negative, Will, is it all right if I follow?
Absolutely.
So negative, you just heard the affirmative response to my questions in an effort to get my ballot. Go ahead and respond. Tell me why I should push my ballot your way, not theirs. They don't carry those goals.
Well, actually, what they have shown is that the only benefit that they have shown is the inspiration, which we actually do not believe that will bring any great change into the current situation, because as we have shown, the inspiration does not really work in these days as it has before with the first missions to Moon. But also what we believe is that if we want to actually develop and improve the situation, we have to do something. We cannot wait for anybody to be inspired. We have to go and have to explore the universe and to get these information in order to solve the real problems. Because if we will just wait for people to be inspired, we will not reach anything. But what we have to do, we have to address the real problems and try to find the solutions and technologies, such as we have shown the examples that we need the technologies, for example, to detect and deflect asteroids, or we need the protection from solar flares that are real problems that we do not need any humans for. So if we want to do the change and we want to improve the situation of the humankind, we should be for the main focus and significant focus on the robotic missions.
If I can add something, the affirmative side was focused on the fact that we should send the humans to the space to actually discover whether it is suitable for them, and if actually people can reach the stars and go and explore. But we think that this is absolutely not worth it in the first place, as we shown you in our negative speeches. Because if in the case that robots are faster, cheaper, can go further, and are basically reaching the same or even better results as the humans, and they're cheaper and faster, we think that it is not worth it to actually try if the universe is suitable for humans, because we already have another way how to achieve same and better result, but cheaper and faster.
If I put aside your spiritual argument about, which seems to me candidly to be a bit circular, that we got to use humans because the goal should be to get humans in space, and we get down to this gold mine that, according to my flow chart, you started invoking in the first presentation about all this cornucopia of energy and space and medical, and it's all out there. So then it becomes a question of how are we going to get it. Are we going to send people out and risk lives, even into the recesses of the sun, or are we capable of getting close to that through the use of robotics? And you're both using a blend. And I've gone back over my flow chart and each of the pieces of evidence on this, and it seems to me to come down to the following. The affirmative right now concedes that humans are more costly. They claim robots will get more costly as they become more like humans. You know, one of my guys at NYU was in charge of the Watson project, which, you know, just beat humans in chess. So, you know, but your point is, start doing that. The more capability you give, the higher the cost. But right now, it's costly. But you claim humans can do more, what you just said. And because they're creative, they're out there, and they can do it. That seems to me to be the gravamen in the argument, which is going to be the more effective way to milk this mine. And I've gone over the evidence you presented on my flow chart, and I'm not perfect. But each of them is the kind of quote you just read, which is somebody's conclusion to that effect.
Okay, so basically...
Is there any data that you can give me, any evidence you can give me, or what's your best quote? Give me your best piece of evidence that humans just are superior to robots and always will be.
Okay, well, first of all, you're basically asking, you know, which is the better explorer, humans or robots, pretty much, right? Okay, so humans. And there are several reasons for this. Number one, we've already discussed basically the unmatched potential they have to make these decisions. As the European Policy Institute already brought up, you know, we're never going to be able to replicate all 5 senses of a robot in a human. So they're always going to have this critical thinking skills that robots don't have. Number two, when we're talking about the actual scientific gains that they're making, we already presented the number of scientific publications that have been found just in regards to the Apollo missions, and this rate is still rising, whereas the publications that are published, the scientific journals that are published in regards to the rovers are actually stagnating. And this is because the scientific value is actually higher with humans as well, because humans are better explorers, because exploring is ultimately about going into the unknown. You don't have a hypothesis. Robots are programmed with a hypothesis. Exploring is about going into something unknown. So that's when your creativity, your ability to come up with solutions to problems is really helpful.
Okay, so could you just repeat that question?
Well, I think she just put it to you. So she claims that the retrospectively, what we've gotten from human expeditions has been much more valuable than what we've gotten. She quotes the literature on that. And that this is, you can isolate the cause for this, which is that when we send him into space, he doesn't have to have a hypothesis. He can create it on the fly, and any machine you spend has to be pre-programmed.
Right.
So she's making a claim. She didn't say anything about cost. You don't have to even mention that. We noticed that.
Well, okay. It's just that I'm really confused because this statement simply does not confirm with reality, quite frankly. Because, in fact, the robots are operated by humans here in Houston for the most part. Spirit has been, Opportunity has been, and this is exactly what we see. And we have not heard ever all this time why is this so much better to have a human on Mars than to have a human in Houston. And quite frankly, we believe that the data is still dependent on robots. They conceded that. You still need the robots to do the spectral analysis. You still need robots to analyze the rocks that you get. And you could even use robots to get these samples back if you so desired. So what we really see...
So I'm sorry.
Right.
I'm going to push on this because in my simple world, my ballot depends on this. She did say 2 things you haven't answered. She said, you look at the articles that have come out of Apollo, and there are multiples of. Now, if you've got a different explanation and it was done by humans as opposed to robots, that's fine. And she did answer your question about how if he were sitting in Houston, it would be different, because you got a machine up there that was pre-programmed on a hypothesis that he can only manipulate so much, is her argument. I'm not saying she's right, but you're not responding to it with your answer.
Okay, I'm sorry if I wasn't clear. What I meant to say is that, okay, you have machine with certain capabilities, and then machine, these capabilities of what it can analyze cannot be changed. We agree. But you have to send those machines with humans as well. You send those humans equipped with certain machines onto, say, Mars, and they analyze the rocks. And, well, then they get, then that's all the equipment you have. And if you don't have the right equipment, if you form the wrong hypothesis by the time you were leaving Earth with the wrong equipment, it's the same part if you were sending robot with the wrong equipment. If you form the wrong hypothesis, it doesn't matter if you send human mission or if you send the robotic mission. It still depends on the hypothesis that you create before you actually move away from the Earth. If that answers your question.
What President Sexton, Dr. Sexton is pushing you on is this. Do you have evidence that the present use of robots in space exceeds the capabilities of gathering data and useful scientific information than human manned missions?
Okay.
That has been true in the past, that it is true today, and that it is likely to be true for some time in the foreseeable future.
Okay, we mentioned the two things of reach and cost. But apart from that, we agree that yes, sometimes human can go there, and because they're right there, they might get better sampling than that. But we are saying that these two reasons of the cost, and we've been saying this all along, the issues of cost and reach are significant of reasons to, even though if it might be marginally worse to send robots there rather than to send humans.
Since we've just brought up the subject of telerobotics, can I respond to his argument that it's just as easy for a human to control a robot while he's in Houston as a human to go there?
Now, you have a rebuttal coming up, so let them direct where the
Okay.
questions go. Good try, though. Any other questions from the panel?
Would you like to respond to the
I would love
issue of telerobotics? I'm actually interested in this. Go ahead.
Okay, so in terms of telerobotics, there's two big considerations. First of all is the time delay. In terms of just reaching the moon, the delay is about 6 minutes at conservative estimates, but when you go to farther places like Mars, it's more around 40 minutes. This kind of time delay is particularly problematic when direct situations come up that require immediate improvisation. So one of these examples is that during a particular mission on the moon, humans and robots were there together, and one of the robots lost a fender and began to spray dust onto the other astronauts. This blocked both the robot's sensors and the astronauts' lines of vision. Luckily, one of the astronauts was able to improvise and make a new fender out of one of his maps, and therefore solve the problem. However, if he had not done so, it's clear that the mission would be entirely jeopardized. The other consideration in terms of telerobotics is just sheer dexterity. So in 1994, a telerobot named Dante 2 was sent to explore Mount Spur, which is a volcano, and it was able to generate some photography and gather some samples while inside the volcano. But then the problem came when the astronauts tried to get, or I'm sorry, not the astronauts, but the people controlling the robot tried to get it out of the volcano. So even though they were physically controlling the robot, they couldn't get it out for all the time that they tried. So they had to physically go in and get it. And obviously, if this had happened in space, the robot would then be rendered useless. So telerobotics is essentially not practical because of the time delays and because robots still just aren't as good at moving around.